Today, I want to give you something extremely actionable, not just ideas, but tools you can start using immediately. There's a powerful connection between the words we speak and the architecture of our brain. Language doesn't just describe our reality, it helps build it. Neural circuits change based on repetition, emotional salience, and behavioral reinforcement. Meaning what you say every day doesn't just echo in the air, it rewires who you are. So here are 10 things you should say out loud every day. Speak them consistently and watch what happens, both inside your mind and outside in your life. I am responsible for my life. These 6 words hold a weight that goes far beyond simple affirmation. When you say this, you're not just making a statement, you're initiating a biological shift. Inside the brain, there are specific circuits, especially in areas like the prefrontal cortex, that light up when we accept agency over our own behavior. Responsibility is the foundation of any real change because it places the locus of control inside of you, not out in the world. When you speak these words, you are training your mind to recognize that your actions, not your circumstances, are the dominant force shaping your outcomes. The human brain is incredibly sensitive to perceived control. Studies in neuroscience have shown that when individuals feel a sense of agency, the belief that they can influence their environment and their future, there's a measurable decrease in stress hormones like cortisol. Simultaneously, there's an increase in activation of the brain's reward systems, particularly the mesolimbic dopamine system. That system doesn't just make you feel good, it motivates you to take action, to persist, to keep moving even when challenges are high. Speaking "I am responsible for my life" begins to reframe how your brain interprets challenges. Instead of seeing obstacles as external attacks or unfair disadvantages, your mind starts processing them as problems to solve, as opportunities to grow. Responsibility is often misunderstood. It's not about blame and it's not about guilt. Blame is backward-looking. It freezes you in the past. Responsibility is forward-looking. It invites movement, strategy, and creativity. When you accept responsibility, you are telling your brain to focus less on assigning causes to what went wrong and more on identifying the next action you can take. This is a profound shift, and over time, it transforms not only how you behave, but how you perceive yourself. Identity is plastic. Every time you repeat to yourself that you are responsible, you are reinforcing a self-position of someone who has influence over their own destiny, someone who acts rather than waits, someone who builds rather than complains. At the neurochemical level, this practice strengthens the relationship between your emotional systems and your executive functions. The limbic system, which governs emotional responses, begins to come under the greater regulatory control of the prefrontal cortex. This connection is crucial because it means you are better able to choose your responses to situations rather than reacting impulsively. You increase what psychologists call response flexibility, the ability to pause, evaluate, and make intentional decisions even under pressure. This ability is one of the strongest predictors of long-term life success across almost every domain: career, relationships, physical health, and mental well-being. The repetition of "I am responsible for my life" also sets a psychological baseline. It prepares you to interpret new experiences through the lens of opportunity rather than victimhood. It teaches your subconscious mind that while external events are unpredictable, your internal response is always within your jurisdiction. You start to notice possibilities that you once overlooked. You start to recognize patterns where others only see chaos. Responsibility acts like a filter that sharpens your perception, narrows your focus onto the variables you can influence, and helps you let go of distractions that don't deserve your energy. Over time, this daily reminder builds a kind of mental toughness that no external validation can replace. Today, I will control what I can and release what I can't. And when you speak these words, you are not engaging in wishful thinking. You are establishing a cognitive framework that allows your nervous system to prioritize energy and attention correctly. Every day, the human brain is bombarded with countless stimuli, ranging from urgent tasks to unpredictable challenges to uncontrollable external events. Without a conscious filter, the mind can quickly become overwhelmed, leading to chronic stress, anxiety, and decision fatigue. But when you deliberately set the intention to focus only on what is within your control, you are activating the prefrontal cortex to manage that flood of information in a much more strategic way. The autonomic nervous system, particularly the sympathetic branch, is highly reactive to perceived threats. When you try to control everything, especially things that are inherently uncontrollable, like other people's opinions, unexpected obstacles, or random events, your brain interprets these as constant threats, keeping you locked in a state of hypervigilance. Over time, this chronic activation damages health, weakens focus, and diminishes emotional resilience. Speaking this sentence daily serves as an antidote. It cues your system to differentiate between actionable variables and those that should be mentally released, reducing unnecessary stress load at a biological level. Cognitive neuroscience shows that when we focus on controllable actions such as effort, attitude, preparation, and response, the brain's dopaminergic systems remain engaged and motivated. Dopamine is not just a pleasure chemical, it's fundamentally a molecule of pursuit. When you feel like your actions matter, dopamine flows. When you fixate on uncontrollable outcomes, dopamine drops and feelings of helplessness rise. Saying, "Today I will control what I can and release what I can't," keeps your motivational circuits active, preserving momentum even in the face of uncertainty. At a deeper level, this statement strengthens emotional regulation. Acceptance of uncertainty is one of the most powerful psychological skills a person can develop. Research in clinical psychology has demonstrated that individuals who practice acceptance, not resignation, but strategic acceptance, show lower levels of anxiety and higher levels of resilience. They recover from setbacks faster, they maintain clarity under pressure, and they are less likely to engage in self-sabotaging behaviors. Speaking these words programs your emotional systems to respond to difficulty, not with panic, but with poise. This practice also trains attentional control, a critical resource in high-stakes environments. Attention is limited. What you focus on grows stronger in your mind's eye. By speaking and embodying the principle of controlling the controllable, you are constantly sharpening your ability to direct attention toward what truly matters. In doing so, you begin to sculpt your experiences intentionally rather than being shaped passively by external chaos. Over time, this reshapes your relationship with challenge itself. You stop viewing unexpected events as personal attacks or failures and start seeing them as neutral data points, things to be observed, evaluated, and navigated with skill. This shift is not passive, it requires active daily practice, but the compound effect over months and years is profound. I am capable of learning anything I need to. This statement directly engages the biological truth of neuroplasticity, the brain's inherent ability to change, adapt, and grow in response to experience. From infancy through late adulthood, the human nervous system is not static, it is dynamic, reshaping itself based on what it is exposed to and what it practices. When you affirm daily that you are capable of learning, you are reinforcing a mindset that aligns perfectly with how your biology actually works. You are instructing your brain to remain in a state of openness and readiness, priming it for adaptation rather than resistance. Learning is not reserved for the young or the exceptionally gifted. It is a mechanical process that involves strengthening certain neural circuits through repetition, focus, and emotional engagement. When you tell yourself you are capable of learning anything necessary, you lower the activation energy required to engage in new challenges. The brain, particularly regions like the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, becomes more efficient when there is a belief structure supporting the effort. Without belief, the brain registers high levels of uncertainty and threat when approaching unfamiliar tasks, making learning slower and more emotionally draining. Speaking this affirmation shields the brain from unnecessary fear responses, freeing up more cognitive resources for actual acquisition of knowledge or skill. There is also a strong link between belief in your learning ability and the regulation of neurotransmitters such as dopamine and acetylcholine. Dopamine provides the drive to pursue new goals, while acetylcholine enhances focus and deepens memory formation. When you assert that you are capable of learning, you are creating the internal chemical environment necessary for effective learning to actually occur. This isn't placebo thinking, it is a deliberate priming of the systems that underpin attention, memory, and motivation. At the psychological level, this affirmation rewires the relationship between failure and self-worth. Without this belief, failure tends to be internalized as a judgment of character, a sign that one is deficient, incapable, or broken. And with this belief active, failure is simply interpreted as data, as part of the learning curve, as a necessary and even valuable piece of the process. This distinction is critical because people who see failure as data persist longer, recover faster, and ultimately outperform those who view failure as personal defeat. Saying, I am capable of learning anything I need to, builds emotional resilience around the learning process itself. In the broader architecture of life, the ability to learn quickly and adaptively is arguably more valuable than any fixed body of knowledge. Skills, industries, and technologies evolve constantly. Those who maintain a rigid mindset tied to what they already know fall behind. Those who keep reinforcing the belief that they can learn whatever is necessary remain agile, relevant, and powerful. Every time you say these words, you are not just motivating yourself, you are activating the deep biological structures that allow learning to happen faster, deeper, and with greater emotional stability. Over time, this belief system integrates so deeply that approaching the unfamiliar no longer feels threatening, but becomes an automatic cue for curiosity, engagement, and growth. I can do difficult things. When you speak this daily, you are not just motivating yourself superficially, you are instructing the deep motivational systems of your brain to expect and embrace challenge. The human nervous system is built to adapt to stressors through a process called hormesis, where exposure to manageable levels of difficulty leads to greater strength, resilience, and capacity over time. Repeating this phrase conditions your mind to interpret effort and discomfort not as signs of impending failure, but as necessary and valuable stages of growth. It calibrates your expectations around struggle, turning what most people view as an obstacle into a signal that you are precisely on the right path. When faced with a difficult task, the brain initially responds with activation of the anterior cingulate cortex, a region heavily involved in error detection and conflict monitoring. This part of the brain essentially raises a flag, signaling that something will require more resources than usual. Without the belief that you can handle difficulty, this signal can trigger avoidance behaviors, procrastination, or anxiety. However, when you program your mind with the truth that you are capable of doing hard things, this activation serves a completely different function. It becomes a cue to focus, to increase effort, and to access deeper reserves of patience and energy. There is also a fundamental shift at the level of emotional regulation. Difficult tasks often bring frustration, doubt, and fear to the surface. Without a trained mindset, these emotions can overwhelm the cognitive systems needed for problem solving and perseverance. But when you consistently tell yourself that you can do difficult things, you reinforce the top-down control from the prefrontal cortex, allowing you to experience these emotions without being hijacked by them. You still feel the difficulty, but you stay in the driver's seat, choosing your actions deliberately instead of reacting impulsively or giving up. Biochemically, the experience of overcoming difficulty is one of the most potent triggers for the release of dopamine, particularly in a way that strengthens the brain's reward systems. This is crucial because the more you associate effort and persistence with internal reward, the more naturally you will lean into challenges in the future. Instead of relying on external validation, your own neurochemical systems will reward you for persistence itself. This is how intrinsic motivation is built, and it is far more durable and sustainable than any external form of motivation. Saying, I can do difficult things also changes the way you forecast your own future behavior. Research in behavioral science shows that people tend to act in accordance with their self-predictions. If you believe you will falter at the first sign of hardship, your behavior will unconsciously fulfill that prophecy. But if you remind yourself daily that difficulty is not a barrier, but a normal and expected part of your journey, you change the entire trajectory of your actions. Difficulty stops being a reason to stop and becomes a reason to continue. The brain begins to associate hard work with progress instead of pain, with possibility instead of failure. I am grateful for, insert 3 real things. This simple practice is not just about positivity. It is about shaping the architecture of your brain toward resilience, alertness, and emotional stability. When you identify specific things you are grateful for and speak them aloud, you are engaging neural circuits involved in emotional regulation, particularly within the prefrontal cortex and limbic system. The act of searching for things to appreciate forces your attentional systems to scan your environment and your memory for sources of positivity, which over time builds a bias toward recognizing opportunity rather than danger or deficiency. Gratitude is often misunderstood as a soft or passive emotion, but from a neurobiological perspective, it is one of the most active processes you can engage in. When you consciously express gratitude for real, tangible things, you stimulate the release of dopamine and serotonin, 2 critical neurotransmitters involved in mood regulation, motivation, and reward. Unlike fleeting bursts of pleasure, the emotional tone created by gratitude is steady and enduring. It balances the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches of your autonomic nervous system, promoting both alertness and calmness at the same time, a state often referred to as optimal performance or flow. Saying "I am grateful for," followed by specific items, events, or people, also activates the brain's salience network, which helps you determine what information deserves your focus. By highlighting real sources of value in your life, you teach your brain to notice and prioritize what is working, what is supportive, and what is worth building upon. This recalibration of focus doesn't ignore problems or difficulties, but ensures that adversity is processed within a broader, more balanced context. Instead of being overwhelmed by negative experiences, you maintain the ability to see solutions, to recognize help, and to summon hope. At a hormonal level, consistent gratitude practices have been shown to lower baseline cortisol levels, reducing chronic stress and its associated wear on the body and mind. Lower cortisol means better sleep quality, improved immune function, more stable energy levels, and greater cognitive flexibility. These physiological effects are cumulative, meaning that the more consistently you engage in spoken gratitude, the stronger and more self-sustaining these benefits become. It becomes easier to regulate emotions, to respond with patience rather than anger, and to persist through challenges without collapsing into despair or bitterness. Speaking specific gratitudes also trains a crucial form of cognitive precision. Vague gratitude produces vague benefits. Precise gratitude, where you name exactly what you are thankful for and why, sharpens your awareness of the structures, relationships, and personal efforts that are actively supporting you. It clarifies cause and effect in your mind, reinforcing an internal narrative that you are connected to sources of goodness, growth, and support. This clarity strengthens your sense of belonging, your belief in your own efficacy, and your willingness to continue investing effort into the life you are building. Over time, this practice not only changes your mood in the moment, but reshapes the very lens through which you interpret all future experiences. I will stay consistent even when it's hard. Speaking this daily imprints a critical behavioral pattern into the nervous system, one that is essential for any meaningful transformation to occur. Consistency, especially under difficult conditions, is not purely a matter of willpower. It is a neurobiological process that can be trained. When you commit out loud to maintaining consistency, even through discomfort, you are strengthening the pathways in your brain that govern persistence, delayed gratification, and disciplined action. These circuits, particularly within the prefrontal cortex and basal ganglia, are responsible for sustaining goal-directed behavior over time, even in the absence of immediate reward. When you face difficulty, the brain naturally defaults toward energy conservation. It seeks the path of least resistance, the easier option, the immediate escape from effort. But by repeatedly affirming your intention to stay consistent, you counteract this primal reflex. You engage executive functions that override short-term impulses in favor of long-term objectives. This process, known as top-down control, increases with repetition, just like any physical muscle strengthens with use. The more often you assert your commitment to consistency during hard moments, the more automatic that response becomes. Eventually, persistence stops feeling like an extraordinary effort and becomes the baseline mode of operation. On the biochemical level, consistency under pressure trains the dopaminergic system to value incremental progress instead of only large, dramatic results. Each time you push through a difficult session, a tough conversation, a challenging task, and follow through as planned, you receive a small but powerful dopamine hit. This reinforces the behavior at a subconscious level, creating a feedback loop where the act of persisting becomes inherently rewarding. Over time, your brain learns that effort itself, not the absence of effort, is what leads to satisfaction and fulfillment. There is also a profound emotional resilience that develops when you stay consistent despite hardship. Emotions like frustration, boredom, self-doubt, and fatigue will inevitably arise when you pursue anything meaningful. Most people interpret these emotions as signs to stop, believing that if something feels hard, it must not be right. But when you commit to consistency no matter what, it opens up an opportunity for complexity that you retrain your relationship with these emotional states. They cease to be stop signs and instead become signals that you are exactly where growth happens. Your ability to experience difficult emotions without abandoning your path is one of the clearest markers of maturity and personal power. Consistency during easy times does not build the structures necessary for extraordinary outcomes. It is consistency during difficult times that forges the neural and psychological toughness required for excellence. Each day that you stay the course, even if progress feels invisible, you are accumulating invisible wins inside your nervous system. These compound over weeks and months into transformations that are imperceptible at first, but undeniable over time. Reaffirming this commitment daily hardwires the expectation that difficulty is not a reason to pause, but a reason to double down with even greater intention and energy. I am responsible for my emotions, thoughts, and actions. Saying this daily shifts you into the driver's seat of your own nervous system. It recognizes the fundamental truth that while external circumstances can trigger reactions, the ongoing regulation and interpretation of those reactions are internal processes under your influence. Responsibility is not about blame or shame. It is about control, about agency. When you speak these words, you are reinforcing the neural pathways that strengthen metacognition, the ability to observe your own mental and emotional patterns without being ruled by them. The limbic system, especially structures like the amygdala, is highly sensitive to environmental stimuli. It reacts quickly and automatically, often below the level of conscious awareness. But the prefrontal cortex, particularly the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, has the capacity to modulate those reactions, to pause, to assess, and to redirect behavior in alignment with longer-term goals and values. When you affirm that you are responsible for your emotions, thoughts, and actions, you are training this top-down regulatory system to engage more rapidly and more effectively. You are literally improving your brain's ability to manage itself in real time. Emotions are not commands. They are data points, as signals from the nervous system about perceived conditions, both inside and outside the body. If you do not recognize your responsibility for how you interpret and respond to emotions, you become a passive recipient of every internal fluctuation. But if you accept full responsibility, you create space between stimulus and response. You gain the ability to feel anger without lashing out, to experience fear without retreating, to notice sadness without collapsing. This separation between feeling and action is where true freedom exists, and it is strengthened every time you affirm this principle. Thoughts operate in a similar way. The human brain generates thousands of thoughts per day, many of them automatic, many of them shaped by previous conditioning, environment, or random fluctuations in neural activity. Without the conscious acceptance of responsibility, these thoughts can dictate behavior and mood unconsciously. But when you acknowledge that you are responsible for which thoughts you engage with, which ones you challenge, and which ones you allow to guide your behavior, you reclaim enormous psychological territory. You stop confusing thoughts for facts, and you begin to curate your internal environment with discernment and intention. Actions ultimately are the outward manifestation of this internal regulation. No matter how strong an emotion or thought may feel, the choice of action remains yours. This understanding builds personal power because it detaches your sense of identity from fleeting internal states and anchors it in chosen behavior. Each time you act in accordance with your values, rather than in reaction to temporary emotions or intrusive thoughts, you are strengthening the integrity of your character. Over time, this integrity compounds into deep self-trust. You know that regardless of what happens externally or internally, you can rely on yourself to respond thoughtfully, constructively, and with purpose. My future is shaped by what I do today. When you say this every day, you reinforce one of the most powerful cognitive realities available to the human mind, the principle of cause and effect within your own life trajectory. You are constantly building the future, not with grand gestures or isolated breakthroughs, but through small, consistent actions taken in the present moment. Neuroscience shows that the brain is prediction-driven, constantly forecasting possible outcomes based on current behaviors and past patterns. When you remind yourself that today's choices are actively sculpting tomorrow's reality, you direct your predictive machinery toward more deliberate and empowering behaviors. The basal ganglia, which are involved in habit formation, operate largely below the level of conscious awareness. They automate behaviors based on repeated actions. If you are not mindful, these systems will simply reinforce whatever patterns you practice most, whether those are constructive or destructive. But when you hold the daily awareness that what you do today carries forward into your future, you engage the prefrontal cortex to intervene in that automatic process. You raise behaviors from unconscious repetition into conscious selection. You start making micro decisions that align with where you want to go rather than where you have been. This principle also taps into the time-based structure of dopamine release. Dopamine is not simply about pleasure. It is about anticipation and pursuit of future rewards. When you remind yourself that today's effort connects directly to tomorrow's success, you strengthen the dopaminergic circuits that make sustained effort possible, and you turn future rewards into present drivers of action. Without this link, the brain tends to prioritize short-term gratification, often at the expense of long-term goals. But when you consistently affirm that the future is built today, you increase your capacity to delay gratification and maintain effort even when immediate results are not visible. At the emotional level, this mindset inoculates you against feelings of helplessness and victimization. When you believe that your future is dictated solely by external circumstances, motivation deteriorates and emotional resilience weakens. But when you anchor into the understanding that what you do today matters, you reclaim agency over your path. You recognize that while you cannot control every external factor, you can control your readiness, your habits, your persistence, and your attitude. And that these internal factors often determine outcomes far more than any isolated event. This belief also cultivates patience, a key but often overlooked element of success. When you understand that the work done today might not yield immediate visible results, but is nonetheless laying the foundation for future gains, you develop the emotional endurance necessary to persist through the long arcs of growth and change. You stop demanding instant feedback and start trusting in the compound effect of your actions. Speaking this truth daily reminds your nervous system that every repetition, every small decision, every disciplined moment is meaningful, even if its full impact will not be realized until weeks, months, or even years into the future. I choose to focus on solutions, not problems. This statement is more than just a mindset shift. It's a conscious redirection of cognitive resources away from mental entanglement and difficulties and toward actionable paths forward. The human brain is wired to detect problems, threats, and challenges. This is an evolutionary survival mechanism. that ensures we're aware of and prepared for danger. However, in the modern world, this built-in tendency to focus on problems can often lead to overthinking, stress, and a sense of paralysis where we become fixated on obstacles instead of discovering ways to overcome them. By choosing to focus on solutions, you activate a different neural network, one that facilitates creativity, clarity, and proactive action. The brain's prefrontal cortex, which governs higher order thinking such as problem solving and decision making, is essential when it comes to navigating challenges. However, if you allow your attention to be hijacked by the emotional reactivity that often comes with encountering a problem, the amygdala and other regions of the limbic system can dominate your response. This can result in a fight or flight reaction, clouding your judgment and making it difficult to approach the problem rationally. By consistently affirming that you choose to focus on solutions, you strengthen the prefrontal cortex's role in regulating and shaping your response, ensuring that you stay calm, collected, and focused on what you can control. Neuroscience also reveals that the brain's dopamine system plays a central role in motivation. When you focus on solutions, you engage the reward system more effectively. Brain releases dopamine when it perceives progress or forward movement, and the act of identifying or pursuing a solution is often just the kind of behavior that triggers this release. Focusing on problems, on the other hand, can leave you stuck in a cycle of negative thinking, which in turn leads to frustration, helplessness, and a lack of motivation. By shifting your focus, you activate the dopaminergic system to move toward progress, boosting your motivation and reinforcing the neural circuits necessary for problem solving and action. Furthermore, by training your mind to seek solutions, you reframe difficulties as opportunities for growth. Every challenge becomes a puzzle, an invitation to tap into your creativity and resourcefulness. This mindset fosters a sense of empowerment as you begin to see obstacles as temporary and manageable rather than permanent roadblocks. It builds your emotional resilience because you stop feeling like a victim of circumstances and start feeling like an active participant in your own success. This shift in perspective strengthens your self-efficacy, the belief that you can influence your circumstances through your actions. Consistently focusing on solutions also improves your relationships and your ability to collaborate with others. When faced with a problem, people who are solution-oriented tend to remain calm and constructive, offering valuable input rather than dwelling on what went wrong. This not only helps you maintain clarity in difficult moments, but it also inspires those around you to approach challenges with the same mindset. It turns problem solving into a cooperative, positive force that drives forward momentum. I am becoming the best version of myself. This affirmation is more than just an aspirational statement. It's a declaration of ongoing growth and an active commitment to continuous improvement. The human brain is wired for development, a process known as neuroplasticity, which allows it to adapt and transform based on experience, learning, and practice. When you say that you are becoming the best version of yourself, you are not stating that you are already perfect, nor that perfection is the ultimate goal. Instead, you are emphasizing the process, the journey, and the potential within you that is unfolding every day. This mindset positions you as both the architect and the builder of your own potential, where each day is an opportunity to evolve and expand your capabilities. The act of affirming that you are constantly growing helps reinforce a growth mindset, a concept popularized by psychologist Carol Dweck. When you embrace this mindset, you start viewing challenges as stepping stones rather than obstacles. The brain becomes increasingly attuned to the belief that intelligence, skills, and emotional resilience are not fixed traits, but can be cultivated through effort and persistence. By consistently affirming that you are becoming the best version of yourself, you create a self-fulfilling prophecy where your daily actions and choices are aligned with this vision of self-improvement. This mindset also shapes how you perceive setbacks and failures. When you view yourself as a work in progress, failures are no longer a reflection of your inherent abilities or self-worth. Instead, they are